Hi folks, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but you've been getting one video per week from me for the past 5 or 6 weeks, I think it is. And it's always been on Saturday. So it's the weekly sermon, Jewish style, right? Because Christians do it on a Sunday, don't they? Or Seventh-day Adventist style. Anyway, I'm rambling. I'm basically just trying to discipline myself to putting one video out per week, a video of some sort of significance. And I don't know whether people prefer the long videos or the short ones, but I seem to be getting longer and longer. Remember the days when YouTube only allowed you to put 10-minute videos on? So anyway, I'm trying to put a video out every Saturday, and this is Friday night, so I better get my skates on. So the subject that it's been on my mind to talk about is altruism, giving, selfless giving. But I want to talk about this in a particular context, the context of selfishness and addiction. I remember reading Ayn Rand, her book Philosophy, Who Needs It? She came up with this philosophy called objectivism, and it was very self-oriented to such an extent that she saw every single motivation of a human being as coming directly from self-interest, even altruism. For instance, when you do something good for another person, you benefit because you get a good feeling out of that. Now, maybe I'm oversimplifying her philosophy, I don't know, but it strikes me that there is a difference between doing something nice for someone because you're going to feel good and doing something nice for someone without any thought about how you're going to feel about it. There's a big difference there. It kind of reminds me of the difference between... There's two different kinds of famous people. There are people who make some kind of achievement and become famous as a result of it, and they accept the fame and enjoy the fame for its own sake without any real attachment to it. But then there are other people who see becoming famous as a goal, as an end in and of itself. So they do something to get famous. And then they realize, this didn't actually satisfy me the way I thought it was going to, and it all backfires because they made it a goal. So, doing something nice for somebody, giving of yourself, it can be done, I suppose, in one of those two spirits. And the other, the spirit that I'm talking about, where you're not even thinking about what you get out of it, it can't be defined as selfish. You can't define every action that you do as self-oriented. It strikes me that here's what's weird about it. When we get a good feeling, when we receive pleasure from doing something, it's usually very easy for that activity to become an addiction. For instance, at the moment, for the last couple of months, I've got back into playing computer games, which I haven't for quite some time. And I'll come home from work in the evening and get my dinner, and I'll sit down in front of a game, and the next thing I know, 5 hours has gone past. And it starts off that I'm getting pleasure out of it, and I keep going and going and going. And by the time those 5 hours have rolled past, I'm starting to feel pretty rotten because it's like too much of a good thing, Now here's what I'm building up to. One of the best feelings in the world is the feeling that you get when you do something good for somebody. But almost nobody seems to turn that into an addiction. I'm not a particularly selfless person, but I have a few memories here and there scattered where I've gone out of my way to do something nice for somebody when everybody else was just ignoring that person. I decided, no, I'm going to step in and help them. And I did. And I felt great. Didn't do it to feel great, but that just happened as a natural consequence. And it's not the kind of feeling like, aren't I such a great person? Because I know I'm not really. It's more here. This is not going well. I haven't prepared this, and I'm really just trying to work through it in my own mind. But it's hard to describe that feeling. It's kind of an inner contentment and peace that is very unusual. I don't know if you can relate to what I'm talking about, but it's kind of an all's right with the world kind of feeling. And you don't really hold on to it because you just kind of get on with the ebb and flow of living. But for a while, you've got it. And it's very, very pleasant. And yet there isn't something inside me that goes, hey, I got to start giving more and more and more because I want to get more and more of that feeling. Isn't it odd that that doesn't happen? And I'm asking myself, why? Why do we not become addicted to altruism when it's a terrific feeling? I don't know, maybe there are people out there that do get addicted to it. I certainly don't feel that way. It's far too easy to think selfishly, to think, no, I've got to keep all my stuff, it all belongs to me, and who knows what might come along in the future. I've got to be careful and be a good little squirrel and store all my nuts up for the winter, rather than just being carefree with my money and possessions and my time and everything else. It's too easy to be selfish, even though we feel great when we're being selfless. Here's what I think the essence of that feeling is. You know the way in spiritual circles we talk about there being no self? And that doesn't mean consciousness is an illusion. Consciousness is very real. But the nature of consciousness is that there is no individual self. This is just like a focal point of limited awareness for the whole universe. There's just a kind of universal self that is you, that is me, that is everyone. So there's no self. I've talked about that in other videos. We won't get into that right now. But if you can vibe with that idea that there's no self, it's easy to say that. But when you behave altruistically, when you give without any thought to what you will receive in return, that is the closest you can come to realizing the truth that there is no self. That's when you really feel connected to the world in a way that self and other disappears. There's no self to get attached to get all bothered about. It disappears. There's just this tapestry that you are connected to and being a part of. This is really why you can't live a self-absorbed life. It's why a self-absorbed life is a very abnormal life, because it perceives a kind of an alienation between your body and the world, when really there is no separation between you and the world. You're just a pattern within a larger pattern. And I'm not talking about two patterns, I'm talking about a sub-pattern within a larger pattern. There's just the larger pattern. So there's no real point to this video other than I wanted to share some thoughts about altruism. That little insight just came to me today, where I was thinking along those lines. You know, why do we feel so good when we do good for others, and why do we not turn that into an addiction? Because you can't turn it into an addiction, because there's no self. In that kind of a circumstance, there's no self to maintain the addiction. So, something to think about. Please, by all means, share your own thoughts in the comments.